I'm Xander McMahon, and this is How We Met, a Queer Love Archive. Well, look who's back with more queer love for you. That's right. Welcome to How We Met, a Queer Love Archive, a place where queer couples share their love stories in their own words. I gotta say, the launch over the last couple weeks has been so wonderful. We did a little launch party here in Philadelphia. That's where I'm based. And it was amazing to just see so many people come out and want to celebrate love and joy and queer people, and just shows how important and powerful community is. And I hope we keep that momentum going with this episode. So, I have a great story for you today from two wonderful people in Berkeley, California, Rosemary and Weston. They met in Colorado doing disability work, disability advocacy work. And I think that their story is just a great example of what happens when you've got two people maybe on parallel paths for a while, working towards the same mission, same goal, and then what happens when those parallel paths finally intersect. There's some misconnections here, and the two of them just have a really lovely dynamic that you'll hear when they talk to each other. But enough from me. I'm going to get out of the way and let them tell their story. So, without further ado, here's Rosemary and Weston in Nice to Meet You Again.
And I don't
Really why I started to actually have a crush on you. All I ever wanted was just for you to want to date me seriously.
I'm Rosemary. I use she, her pronouns.
My name is Weston. I use he, him, or they, them pronouns. My life feels a little bit like I've been on one trajectory. My first memory is being baptized as a child. And I've been working towards being an Episcopal priest since I was probably 14. It's when I knew I wanted to be a priest. And I ended up in Steamboat Springs, Colorado in the fall of 2018 because I was doing the Episcopal Service Corps, which is a full year of full-time work at a nonprofit almost for free. And they pay for a little small stipend, and you live in community housing with roommates, and you worship together and do other sorts of formation together. And when I was researching different organizations that the Service Corps worked with, I found the Center for Independence in Steamboat Springs. And I didn't know anything about independent living. I barely knew anything about disability. It was a steep learning curve when I got there and started doing the work. But I realized when I was learning about disability that I kind of view my transness as a disability. I heard the stories of people experiencing marginalization and having facilities that you can't access, and just the unfairness of the inaccessibility. And I really related to that experience after growing up in North Carolina when there was some terrible laws about trans people using the restroom. So allowing myself to not only learn about disability, but also allowing my identity to grow into a disabled identity has been really powerful. And now I identify as disabled myself, both as a trans person and as someone with ADHD and certain neurodiverse tendencies.
I'm originally from San Diego. I grew up in California and moved to Colorado in 2017. I had gone to college in San Diego and I just really wanted some change. And I had done a lot of disability organizing work, specifically in California, but I didn't know anything about the history of the disability movement in Denver specifically. And so it just really felt like I was moving to the right place at the right time to continue to do disability advocacy work. And then I learned about ADAPT and how it started in Denver, and then got to work at Atlantis, which was born out of ADAPT, and was working as their youth transition coordinator, their first youth transition coordinator. And so me being able to do this job, to be plugged into a new community, it really felt like 2018 and 2019, I was starting to really establish myself in Colorado and get to know the networks, and it was just continuing to grow and expand.
The story of how we met is kind of complicated because I remember meeting Rosemary at least twice before she remembers meeting me. We met working together in disability work in Colorado. We got put on the same youth conference project, youth camp called the Colorado Youth Leadership Forum. And that's how we got to know each other in a mutual sense.
When Weston and I were working together, we were on the phone, like we were on a Zoom meeting, which is how I first remember meeting Weston and being like, oh, this is a cute trans gay boy who's wearing probably the same tie-dyed t-shirt that you're wearing right now, actually. And
I think you're right.
And he was wearing a ring on his wedding ring finger. And I was like, oh, he's cute and gay, but probably married, but still cute and gay. And then after our meeting on Zoom, I called him because the program has a lot of history, and I know the history because I brought the program from California. And I called him mostly because I wanted to warn him that it's a hot mess and what he was getting himself into. And I also wanted to just vibe it out and see what he was like. And on that phone call, we were on the phone the whole way home from work. And he said, I'm pretty sure we've met before. And I am kind of witchy, spiritual, believe in multiple lives. And so I was like, wow, he really thinks yeah, I feel that too. I feel like we've met before for sure. Then months later, I find out that he means that we actually met in person multiple times, and I don't remember any of them. And he's like, no, we met at this thing, and then we met at this thing, and we talked, and I'm like, I am so sorry. I don't remember that at all.
I remember Rosemary the first time in October 2018. So I was in Denver for a conference. I remember seeing a really cute girl trying to navigate her wheelchair through a ballroom full of empty chairs, which is a really difficult thing to navigate when you're using a wheelchair, and the floor is carpet, so she's kind of stuck. But I remember her coming to the door around the same time as me, and I think she said, "Excuse me," and I let her through. And I remember thinking she was really cute, but I was totally in a relationship at that point, and I was living outside of Denver. I was not looking for anything, but
well, did we just briefly ships passing in the night?
Yeah.
I just walked by you, but you remembered that, and if I think really hard, I can kind of remember it, but not really. The second time I do
But
remember.
the second time was more explicit. Like, we definitely met. Like, just in case I was imagining that person was Rosemary and it wasn't, we definitely met at a march with an Adapt Action in Denver. She had worked with my boss, and it was very, very, very cold that day. We were gathered outside, and everybody was pretty grumpy. And my boss introduced me to Rosemary, and I remember that. She does not remember that. I forgive her for this. We had a working relationship through YLF. That really was the beginning of our friendship. I ended up in Denver for the conference, and Rosemary came and helped me. I remember every morning she would come and bring me coffee, even though she was under no obligation to do so. And there was one day during that conference where she walked in to the cafeteria and I was crying because I was so stressed, and it was one of the hardest weeks of my life. It was not well planned or organized, so I felt like there was a lot of pressure. And she came into the cafeteria while I was crying and on the phone with my mom, and approached me and then sat and listened to me talk about what was going on and kind of game plan a way to support. And that support continued throughout that week. There was an emergency one night, and I had to deal with a fire department and an EMS sort of situation, and people mismanaging various things. And she picked up her phone as soon as I called after it was over. And that week, that day when there was that emergency, we talked on the phone for at least an hour and a half, maybe even longer, maybe even 2 hours. And we talked about everything. Mm-hmm. But you were in the bathroom.
I was in the bathtub.
She was in the bathtub.
At my girlfriend's apartment, who I was dating at the time. I was very much in a committed relationship this whole time, in 2018, 2019, 2020. And I just was like, this person and I, we really get it. And I want to support him, and he's trying his best.
People used to joke when we would go around in Denver that I was her boyfriend, even when she was still dating the other person and I was dating other people. So for a lot of people, it was obvious. Even her girlfriend called me her boyfriend.
Yeah. She'd be like, what are you going to do today? And I'm like, oh, I'm going to take Weston out on a little date. We're going to go have brunch and then do some thrifting. And then later we would like go do that. And then I'd come back and hang out with her. And she was like, how was your date with your boyfriend? It just, our friendship was not a very traditional friendship. And I think in the like queer communities, we get that. Like our friendships are just so intimate and deep, and the ways that we care for each other and show up are beyond just like what you put as a friendship and like the mutuality of it. And there were so many moments and that we just really cherished and appreciated of each other. And you were my safe person in a lot of instances. And yeah, it was always blurry, I think.
For me, there were little moments throughout our friendship that were so sparkly and wonderful and fun that I think I always had a crush on you, and I wanted it to be platonic. Mm-hmm. Because that would have been easier. But it was really when COVID happened. COVID really changed something in our dynamic. before COVID, we had been maybe seeing each other once a week, once every other week, maybe going out for brunch on weekends or going to the botanic gardens and strolling around. But after COVID started, we started FaceTiming once a day at least, if not in the morning and at night. We became each other's people. I was living with 4 other people, and the only other person besides those 4 people that we were allowed to socialize with or even see was Rosemary. So I would go grocery shopping for her when she was feeling like it was too risky for her as a high risk person to go out and grocery shop. And I would come over to her house and mow her lawn so that she didn't have too many weeds, or just do some yard work or take out the recycling. And we got to be really quite close when COVID started getting really bad in the spring of 2020.
I remember, I think it was one of your first long bike rides that you had went on, and you rode by my house, and the apartment was like on the 4th floor, and you wanted water, like you ran out of water and you needed more water. And so I like refilled a water bottle that I had, and then got a post-it note and I wrote, "I miss you," with a heart on it, and I taped it on the water bottle, and then I threw it down from the 4th story balcony, and then I like waved at him from above, and that was like really cute. Again, I was still very much with the other person. You were very much dating other people, and this was our friendship.
It wasn't long after that I was a little bit tipsy and I called my mom and I told my mom that I love Rosemary so much that I would marry her and her partner just to be with her forever. So it's very clear that I came to terms with the feelings significantly sooner than Rosemary did. The complicating factor became I was finishing my second year of the Episcopal Service Corps, and Rosemary was living in a 3-bedroom house by herself. And I didn't have any money or a job to go to once the Service Corps was over. And so Rosemary, being a kind friend and a generous person, offered one of the rooms in her home for me to move into after the Service Corps was over. So I felt really complicated about that once I started coming to terms with how much I actually loved her. I didn't want to be that guy that moves into a new house with a new roommate who's a beautiful woman and is like, "Hi, hard eyes. I actually love you. Will you please date me?" Or even worse than that, right? I didn't want to be that guy. So once I moved in, I just had to be really patient. It was very difficult.
I broke up with my then partner at the time in the end of May, and Weston moved into the house mid-July. It was really nice to have Weston move in because it was really just me by myself with our cats in a 3-bedroom house. By like, I didn't see anyone. I didn't have anyone over besides Weston, who would do groceries and that, but like he wasn't in the house. And so it was really nice for us to just have that time when you did move in, and we would have little moments in the garden of like, try this tomato, it's so good, and growing things together was really sweet. We would cuddle on the couch as friends. I was like, this is so gay. I can't fall in love with my roommate. This is stupid. I need to get myself in check. I also just broke up with my girlfriend of almost 3 years. you don't have feelings for him. He's just the next closest person. That's irrational to fall in love with your roommate. And then I said it out loud to my therapist. And I was like, I think I'm in love with Weston. And it would be like he would go on a bike ride and bring me home flowers that he picked on his bike ride home. And every time it would surprise me. And I was like, oh, a sunflower. You thought of me? And he would just do it sporadically. And the ways that he cared for me and really took COVID seriously and wanted to protect me meant a lot. It still does. And I told my therapist, I was like, listen, falling in love with your best friend is risky. What if he doesn't feel that way? What if this is like just it? This is our friendship. And also you were having like a whole hot gay boy moment and really enjoying dating men. And so,
well, I would say I was marginally enjoying dating men. I mean, does one really enjoy dating men?
will you talk about your Tuesdays?
Yeah, for the first month that I lived with Rosemary, I had a Tuesday ritual where I would go to the grocery store for us with a very organized list, and I would call my friend and I would pace in circles in the store with my grocery cart and ask my friend, is this normal? She said this to me. She fell asleep on my shoulder last night. Does she like me? I don't know what to do. I really like her. What does this mean? And I would just go through anything that I thought was interesting.
Then it just kind of all hit me at once. And it was so clear and obvious, and I couldn't ignore it. And so I told my therapist on a Wednesday. And then by Friday night, that's when things really changed. We were cuddling on the couch, and then at that point we had separate bedrooms because we're roommates and you have separate bedrooms. But we would like fall asleep watching TV in his room, and then I would go back to my room. But that night we were cuddling watching TV, and I got up to go to the bathroom, and something in my body was like, ask him if I should stay. And he looked at me and paused, and he said, stay. And I was like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And so then I like got back in bed, and we were snuggling, and he turned the lights off, and I was ready to make the first move. I was like, I'm going to kiss him. I'm going to do it. We're already snuggling. We're already there.
Our faces were probably an inch apart at this point.
It was like moments away. And then Weston pulls back and he's like,
what is happening?
And I'm like, what do you mean?
I made her stop because
I couldn't even start.
It was started. It was started. As soon as you asked if you were going to stay, it was started. And we couldn't pretend like we hadn't been breathing in each other's faces for the last hour. And the line had been crossed. It was clear, like there was something there that neither of us were ignoring or pretending was friendship. And I knew that I didn't want to hook up with you or like get together with you without understanding where you were. and without talking about where I was, because I took our friendship so seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And that was always my first priority. I always said, if I have feelings for her and I have an opportunity to say it at some point and she doesn't return the feelings, then it's not what it's supposed to be, and we can still be friends. But I needed to talk before we started to make out.
Yeah, then we talked for like hours.
We hardly slept that night. And we haven't really looked back.
Mm-hmm. 10 days later, we decided to go on a cross-country road trip and drove to San Diego so that we could be at the beach, but also so you could meet my family, because you hadn't met my family at that point. And that felt big. And I remember calling my dad to be like, hi, I decided that we're going to come on vacation and I'm going to bring Weston. And he was like, oh, great. I get to meet him. So what is the situation? Are you like friends? Are you dating? Are you like more? And he usually doesn't ask those kinds of questions. He just is like, okay, great. And I was like, yeah. Funny that you ask. Actually, we were friends, but now we're dating. Is that okay? Can we still stay at your house in the same room? And he's like, yeah, that's fine. You can stay here. And you and my dad got along great. You still get along great. It's very cute. My dad and Weston have a really cute relationship.
That was a really meaningful trip for me. Rosemary met my parents when we were friends before COVID started, but I had never been around any of her family. And she talks about her dad a lot. And it meant a lot to me to be introduced to him, to be welcomed into his house. He's a really hilarious yet also firm Japanese man. He's a sushi chef, so we got to eat so much good food. I got really lucky with that one. But the most meaningful thing I think that I remember from that trip, that first trip to San Diego, was Rosemary's dad FaceTimed with his mom, Rosemary's grandmother, in Japan. They were talking about me in Japanese, and your grandmother said, so what's wrong with him?
Mm-hmm.
And Hiro-san said, nothing. He's a good man. He's a good person. And having that affirmation from Hiro is really important to me, because I know how much he worries about Rosemary and wants her to be safe and held and cared for. And I do my best.
That was really sweet for him to just... I'm like, you just met him. What do you know? How do you know that already? I know that, but how do you know that? And he just was like very confident with it and defended you really quickly. It like this all happened in Japanese, and I'm sitting there and I'm like trying not to cry. And then I have to wait and tell him later what that whole conversation was. And meanwhile, I'm just sitting here having gigantic feelings about my dad affirming Weston to my grandma. Yeah, it was very good. After us getting together, I think the biggest milestone was moving from Colorado to here. And
where is here?
Berkeley, California. Thank you for asking. You applied to seminary in Berkeley, and it was a very easy choice. The other options were Texas or Virginia. And We're like, we're too queer for both of those places. Like, California it is.
So I did call my mom during COVID and say that I would marry Rosemary. So I had like clearly thought about it for a while beforehand, but I didn't get very serious about the idea of logistics until probably the fall when I started seminary and we had just moved to Berkeley. I just didn't see us moving in any other direction. We talked about being together forever. We talked about what we wanted from the relationship, and we agreed that we wanted to get married. I didn't want to show, and I was sure that Rosemary also didn't want to show. I wanted it to be a special moment just between us that was potentially mundane, yet magical. And I remember it was November 20th, 2021. And Rosemary had gotten her COVID booster that morning. So we knew that she was going to be feeling pretty crappy in a little bit. But before she started to feel crappy, we decided to go for a walk. And I brought the ring with me on the walk. And as we were going on our walk in our neighborhood, I picked flowers casually from various yards and made a tiny bouquet of flowers. And I slipped the ring onto the tiny bouquet. And then we got to this house that's a few blocks from our house, the Butterfly House. It's a yard that I guess was cultivated to foster butterfly growth and hatching and whatever it is that butterflies do. And we had kind of been keeping an eye on it because we had seen some chrysalises of monarchs there. So we were looking to check to see if they were open. So we got over to the Butterfly House and
there were so many butterflies.
butterflies.
They all had hatched like that day.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was really like 10 butterflies flying around this yard. And so Rosemary's kind of oblivious and excited. She's like, oh, look at this. Oh, look at this. Oh my gosh, look at this. Look at all these butterflies.
I'm like, oh my God, there's another one.
I am like behind her with the tiny bouquet in my hands, just looking at her and waiting for her to realize something is happening. And I was like, hey, can I ask you a question? You are the prettiest flower in the world. Would you marry me?
I just was so oblivious to everything. I didn't realize that he was picking flowers behind me. I just was so in awe. And then I turn around and my heart was just so excited because I knew what was happening once I had looked at him. It like all pieced together. And then I looked at the flowers and they were so pretty. And then I looked and I was like, is the ring on the flowers? Like I just melted and it felt perfectly us and low key, but really intimate and thoughtful. And of course I said yes. That was not a question. And I couldn't stop crying because I was so happy. You proposed first, and then I proposed, which sounds silly, but I proposed and did the thing after, about a month after you had proposed. We really like Christmas. I really love Christmas. And one of the things that we have been doing since before we got together is I asked Weston to go with me to go pick out my Christmas tree. And it was something that we'd love to do together. And so that year when we got our Christmas tree, we were putting our ornaments up. And I had put his ring in a ornament. And I wrote something sweet. And I told him that there was a surprise in the tree that he had to go find. And so he looked for the ornament.
It took a while for me to find it.
We had our wedding in the community garden across the street from our house. And we had spent a lot of time putting it together. It just was, we didn't want a big thing. We didn't want it to be a big corporate wedding. We also didn't have that kind of money. And we were still worried about COVID and people traveling. So we had like 35 people at our wedding of like our closest family and friends. And my stepmom did the flowers for our wedding, which was it's already in the garden. So there were tons of beautiful flowers. But then she just took it to a whole new level, and like all of our community came together and really helped make it a beautiful space. It was the most perfect day. We had the best weather. We had bubbles. We had singing. It was a really great day.
It was the best day of my life. And I'm like pretty opposed to saying such things so confidently, but in theological terms, that day was an inbreaking of God's kingdom on earth.
You wore a kilt and I wore a nice white dress, and our really good friend Tori, who is also a priest, married us. And yeah, then our friends sang, and we had a moment for our ancestors and folks that we wanted to honor in spirit. And yeah, it was just really beautiful. One of the things that we read in our wedding ceremony and as a part of our vows was something that Weston and I had done as a like collaborative art piece when he first moved into the house. And I wanted something that really said what, like the intentions that we wanted to fill our home with. And so we had brainstormed on the words and the wording of it and the elements. And then you came up with the final draft, and then I painted around it. So we can read that.
Home, full of joy, laughter, and good food, to be safe and welcoming to all who enter, where we can be exactly who we are without judgment, shame, or fear. A sanctuary for hope to dwell and grow in the company of love, compassion, and tenderness, where we own our life in all its forms, witnessing joy, pain, and grief, listening to all in equal measure. A nest that grants peace and rest, that when we rise each morning, our souls be prepared to change the world. The end of YLF, when we first met, I wrote Rosemary a note that said, "It's the blessing of a lifetime to have met you." And I stand by that.
You're still my favorite person. Always.
It was a perfect day in Berkeley. I didn't even have pit stains. That never happens. Never, in my life, there's not been one day in my life that I've not had pit stains except for my wedding day.
Thank you so much, Rosemary and Weston, for sharing your story with this podcast. By the way, a few months after this was recorded, Weston was ordained as a deacon in the Episcopal Church. So congrats, Weston. You did it. How We Met, A Queer Love Archive is produced by me, Xandra McMahon. Audio recording for this episode was done by Natalia Navarro. The How We Met theme is composed by Addison Ryder. Other music in this episode is from the Epidemic Sound Library. If you want to see some cute cartoons of all the couples on the show, head over to Instagram @HowWeMetPod and check out the amazing original art by Emily Giroux. How We Met will be back in 2 weeks with more queer love. Talk to you then.